another of my one-handed videos. Sorry about that. But you'll notice in the previous one I mentioned I was about to start building up the open cab conversion kit from Backwoods Miniatures for the Davenport gas mechanical, and I've now made a start on that. I'm hoping that this will be helpful to anyone considering building a loco kit from, for example, Backwoods, because there's a lot of common issues here. You'll see there just about there's 4 at the back and 2 at the front. There's these brass rods that support the roof. The instructions said they were 1mm, but in fact that was wrong. Not the first time. I found quite a few inconsistencies with their instructions. It comes with tiny little, let's call them pads, that sit at the bottom. They're smaller than ants, by the way, British ants. In fact, I don't know if you can see on this brass strip. You see these here over my thumb? They are literally about, these are about 4mm in length, but in fact these at the bottom are much smaller again. So you've got to cut those off the brass sprue and then try and super glue those in while you're putting the rods in. So that was a massive task, and I got fairly steady hands, but it's quite tricky work, so be warned. That's the sort of stuff you're going to have to deal with. Also, the holes in the brass plate here, which has been glued to the foot plate, the pre-drilled holes they have were 0.7mm. These little pads that I've called them pads at the bottom, they were drilled 0.7mm. There was no 1mm rod included in with the kit anyway, so I think that's just an error. So I've done 0.7mm. So you've got to drill holes into the foot plate to accommodate those. So there's a little thin brass plate here that's one of their brass etchings, but in order for the rod to get a decent support, it needs to go in at least 2mm, I would say, into the foot plate. So you've got to drill these holes, drill through the brass plate into the foot plate with a pin vise or something. I think here if I can reach over. This is what I used. I've got several pin vices, but this one's a bit chunkier, because it wasn't an easy task. It's dead easy to break the drill, of course, when you're really scuppered. But so you've got to really carefully drill, in this case 6 holes for those rods to go in. Then you've got to super glue them in place, trying to keep them vertical and in 2 planes at the same time. That's not easy. And then eventually roof supports go on. These are pre-drilled. They were also drilled 0.7, so pretty clear it's not 1mm. The instructions are wrong, it's 0.7. And then you've got timber sections to put on the roof. I ended up using a bit of masking tape, turned it upside down, stuck all those onto there so I could then roll the whole assembly on before gluing that. That's also super glued. Not easy actually. And then you've got this grid sort of grating section at the back here. So and a lot of these joints, you've got a rounded rod that has to be super glued against another rounded rod. So in terms of surface area, contact surface area, it's infinitesimal. You've got a rounded curved surface being glued to another rounded curved surface. So quite a pain really, and it's not that satisfactory. So I'm not quite sure how they could have done it any differently, but just be warned, you've got those sort of challenges ahead. So anyway, that seems to have gone ahead without too much of a hitch, but it wasn't easy going. This hood, obviously still loose at the moment, you have to cut the top section of this away so there's more clearance for the driver and fireman to see what's ahead of them. And I've sprayed it all inside here matte black. I'll do the same the back of the hood as well, so that all matches before I get to the next stage. So quite a challenge. These kits aren't for the faint-hearted, as I've said before. I suspect it's beyond a lot of modelers really, unless they're used to working in fine detail and they've got very steady hands and a bit of basic engineering now. But anyway, others may disagree. With this, of course, you get, I showed you this earlier, another one of the brass etchings. A lot of these parts are common to the dress-up kit for the Gas Mechanical. In fact, I've got one of those and I've already built that. The instructions for the open cab mention these as obviously being optional, so there's things you can put on there if you want or not. So I've got to decide what I'm going to do about that. I haven't made my mind up yet. The chassis and the loco is all stripped down now. I'll unsolder the capacitors because I'm going to convert it to DCC, so you won't need the capacitors on the motor. So I'll hardwire that up right through to the wheel pickups, and I'll add a keep alive. In fact, I got 2 of those in the mail yesterday, the Lay's keep alives, and I think they're pretty good value, and they keep their wheel spinning several seconds after the power's cut. So that's good news. So there we are, just a quick update. It's not an easy build, but anyway, so just be warned. So don't buy one, but just think very carefully before you part with your money, especially as these aren't particularly cheap to buy anymore. So there we go, first update.